Hi, I'm Max Keizer. This is the Max and Stacy Report with Max and Stacy. My God, is the bond market truly facing an existential crisis? Will it ever come back? Were we right for the last 5-6 years? Stacy.
Well, Max, that's quite interesting because, of course, when a market changes from a bull to a bear or a bear to a bull, one thing that is typical of these sort of shifts in a total, secular change from one market to the other is the denial of the disbelief in the participants, whether they're bulls, that they refuse to believe that a bear market is emerging and that all their losses, if they just keep on hanging on, they'll get back to a new all-time high. The same with the bear. Of course, we've been in a 40-something year bull market in bonds, and many people on the various programs that we had over the years have called the end of the bull market, and they got annihilated. It was called the widow trade. And of course, now it looks like it's actually over. And one thing that you could see that is kind of indicative of this is that we've seen basically the bond vigilantes back in charge, certainly with the United Kingdom, where the bond market basically forced out the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Kwasi Kwarteng. So we saw him ousted after just like a month, less than, a little bit over a month in office, and he was ousted. So that's, to me, suggests like the last time you saw that sort of power in the bond market was during Bill Clinton's era.
Right. So in 1987, the crash of 87, it brought about the plunge protection team, and stock markets were not functioning with supply and demand dynamics anymore. It was based on the S&P futures contracts buying done in Washington to keep the stock market afloat. In 1993, as you allude to, under Bill Clinton, remember the bond market had a drawdown of, I guess, maybe 4% or so. This was considered catastrophic, and the decision to euthanize the bond vigilantes was made. And since 93, we haven't had any real price discovery in the bond market either, because the Federal Reserve became more aggressive in buying back bonds to make sure that they would not reflect the true underlying fundamental economics of the United States economy or the global economy until 2022. So like when you hold a beach ball down under the water, you keep going deeper and deeper, it gets harder and harder. Eventually you lose the grip and the beach ball pops to the surface. In this case, that beach ball popping to the surface would be yields or interest rates as the bond market plunges after many years of artificial bond manipulation for the prices. And right now, you've already had the biggest bond collapse in recorded history. You remember interest rates were at 300-year lows in the United Kingdom, in Britain, in England. And they were at 240-year lows in the United States. They were at multi-hundred-year lows, followed by now the biggest collapse in bond prices in hundreds of years. And they've already collapsed. So markets are trying to figure out, is it time to look over the horizon and will they recover? Are we getting back to business as usual? Or is this structurally, meaning a multi-year secular bear market in bonds? I think that's the question people are trying to get their hands on right now. I would posit that we're into a structural secular bear market.
Well, if everybody thought that already, it would probably not be the case. It would be like we're going to actually continue with the bull market, because this is something that has happened over and over on our show when we had too many guests that were all saying, yep, it's the bear market. The bull market is over. It's the beginning of a bear market. But you see definitely when you travel around, like there's no sort of indication by the population, because remember, it's been over 40 years where the Fed has continuously been able to lower rates. Everybody's been able to roll over their debt at a cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. They could extend and pretend. The US government, all governments, municipalities, corporations, individuals have been able to roll over their debt, increase the asset value of their portfolio, whether it's stocks, whether it's, their house prices. Of course, right before the end was the classic, right? If it was genuinely the end of the bull market, what you saw in January, February, March of this year was definitely a parabolic move in the US housing market. Like our house price here in the United States was going up parabolic. It was absurd. I had never seen anything like that. That was more like London sort of prices that they're used to over the past 2 decades of parabolic moves. Like that had never been seen before in the United States, but you were definitely seeing that. And now it's of course collapsing as mortgage rates have doubled in the past just few months.
Right. So the interest rate, the 10-year Treasury, is at the fulcrum of all financial activity because it all is based on credit. And the price of credit is depending on how the economy is structured. And we have winners and we have losers. For years, the losers were the pension funds who were getting 0 on their money markets or passive investments. Now they're getting 2.5% on a money market, and some banks are offering certificates of deposit paying 4%. So that's the first time we've seen that in many, many years. And I think you're going to get to a headline at some point talking about our friend Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan. Of course, they're sitting on over $1 trillion and they're making record income on that cash. And that brings about a lot of other questions. You know, it's a market, it's an economy, it's a world, it's a country where we have heads you win, tails you lose. No matter what the interest rate scenario is, guys like Jamie Dimon and the Wall Street bankers and the hedge funds and the central bankers are never, ever going to lose because they're always going to front run these markets. They're always going to structure their portfolios in a way to maximize their return no matter what the situation is because they have ways to mitigate risk and manage risk. The average person, which means 330 million Americans, has no way to manage their risk structurally or predictably. So they're the ones that always take it on the chin. And once again, they're getting hit again.
Yeah, that headline is JP Morgan CEO says its bank is sitting on 1.2 trillion of cash. As Max pointed out, they'll be collecting more and more interest on that. Of course, the ordinary American has almost 0 in cash and savings. They have huge piles of debt. And one thing, of course, people always argue is that, well, inflation is great during that time. Well, of course, what the Fed is trying to do to slow inflation is to wreck the economy. They openly state they need people to lose their jobs in order for inflation to be tamed. So the job losses will be coming, but they don't have the benefit of having any savings to capitalize on the rising interest rates. In fact, their debt servicing costs are going up. So all they have is debt. Of course, in a sort of beggar thy neighbor policy that you're seeing in this period of deglobalization and de-dollarization is you're going to see more and more, especially as we head into the next general election season. We have the midterms coming up in just a few weeks, but we have the general election. And what you'll see then is more and more debt forgiveness for Americans. They'll be able to write off like all the constituents who might vote for the next candidate. Joe Biden says he's going to run again, but they'll write off more and more debt. Right now, they've written off some student debt. They'll write off mortgage debt. They'll write off car debt. They'll write off all sorts of debts because, of course, they won't be able to service it. That will be the beggar thy neighbor policy of this era because, importantly, Dylan LeClaire points out the sort of moment that we're in, the sort of action you've seen in the bond markets has been seen twice before in history. What happened right after that? He says the last time the U.S. markets faced a drawdown of this magnitude, the U.S. government defaulted upon its gold peg within the next 24 months. So in 1933, we saw the Executive Order 6102 when, of course, that was, they revalued the dollar, but they also seized gold from U.S. citizens. This time, they're going to just write off our debts and like beggar thy neighbor of the rest of the world as basically we embrace the executive branch and the government embraces de-dollarization and deglobalization because, of course, they're the ones driving a lot of it. If you see their actions towards the biggest energy producers in the world, whether it's Russia and now Saudi Arabia, or their biggest the source of manufactured goods, which is China. And then 1971, the Nixon shock. So this is the sort of thing within 24 months, within 2 years. So by the next election, we're going to see some sort of dramatic action to default because those were the 2 defaults, really what we saw there by pulling off the gold standard domestically first in 1933 and then internationally in 1971. So the only way to do that in this next one is to just write off all the debts, the trillions of dollars of debts and mortgages, student loans, auto loans, all that sort of thing for Americans, and the rest of the world will have to pay just like it did during those other periods of the the Great Depression era, and then 1971, the 1970s shocks of the stagflation globally.
Right. Well, it's a good time to revisit the idea of you can't taper a Ponzi scheme. And what we mean by that is you can't taper a Ponzi scheme. So going back to Ben Bernanke, when he was Fed chairman, just won a Nobel Prize, by the way, he said, we can reverse our actions at any time and taper this central Ponzi scheme we have going now since Alan Greenspan. But what we find out in 2022 is that, in fact, you can't taper the Ponzi scheme. They have runaway inflation now. And the moment of tapering, or the moment of managing that, would have been years ago, when interest rates should have been taken higher, as it would normally be done if the Fed were doing its primary job. But because it became an activist Fed, and because it became the backstop to stock market speculators, it's decided to override the market and to intellectualize what's going on by one guy at the Fed. And that's a command and control Soviet era type approach to the economy. And it's led to a Soviet era type collapse. What we're seeing now in the United States and around the world is like a 1999 Berlin Wall collapse or Soviet collapse. The United States economy is in free fall. The only way to get a handle on the inflation is, as we've said, you can't taper it. You've got to break it. You've got to allow the economy to collapse. So they will raise rates until, or forgive loans, as you're saying, which is the same thing, until you have a bond market collapse. There's a lot more room to collapse to stop the runaway inflation. There's always been two choices. Either it's a Weimar Republic print until you get hyperinflation, or you have to allow a deflationary bust like the 30s, like the Depression. At the moment, what Jay Powell is saying is that we're going to go the deflationary depression route. We're going to a default, essentially, on our debts to get a handle on inflation. It's not absolutely certain that that's the avenue they will take. To tell you the truth, I think they're going to chicken out, and they're going to go the Weimar Republic hyperinflationary route within the next few months. Because that's the cowardly way to do it. And these policymakers in Washington, if nothing else, they're cowards.
They'll do it globally deflationary. That's what I'm saying, is they're going to write off U.S. citizen debt. And that amounts to trillions. That's the vast majority of debts around the world is U.S. citizens, U.S. corporations, U.S. municipalities, U.S. cities, U.S. pension funds. They'll write off our debt here. The rest of the world will suffer a deflationary collapse because of that, because, of course, they own all the debt. So they're going to get stuck with a bad bill of goods. You mentioned the collapse of the Soviet Union. It did not happen in 99. It was more like 89 to 91, 92 period when the Berlin Wall and everything fell. And another thing that's unique, of course, is Bitcoin. Now, I think the thing that really destabilized everything, because I think it revealed all about the system, and it was a path taken. So we can't be certain how much longer the Fed and Jay Powell and the central banks of the world might have been able to extend and pretend, might have been able to roll up all this debt into an SDR, might have been able to do something to continue as is. But of course, Bitcoin was birthed in January of 2009, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. So that's quite interesting at this unique turning point in the fiat system, in the bond market, which is the foundation upon which the entire fiat system is based, that this time the chancellor was forced out. The chancellor was ejected from this fiat system. And that's a new thing for Bitcoin. This is going to prove really what it is, I think, over the next 2-3 years, especially as we head into the US general election, because I think that's going to be the point where they have to do something for the electorate, right, of the United States. I think it'll be forced to a head sometime soon. My guess is that they're going to write off all U.S. debts, all U.S. corporate, municipality, state, city, all debts here will be written off. That's my guess. But you could see this, the event horizon sort of disintegration happening in the system by this headline, I think. The Fed finally did it. They broke the market. The Dow Jones, the 30 largest industrial stocks on planet Earth, is officially more volatile than Bitcoin. So that's what they're swapping places, right? Like we have those layer one monies. Bitcoin is a new layer one money. Before it was the US Treasuries. The entire system that we know for the past, since 1971, as he mentioned, when we went bankrupt and we went on an all US dollar, US Treasury standard, that was the last 50 years of stability. And Bitcoin like triggered the instability. It was the triggering device. I don't think it's any coincidence that since 2009, we've saw the entire disintegration of kind of like culture and the psychology and the mental health of the ruling class of America.
I keep writing about this for Bitcoin Magazine. And my next piece will be more specifically how Bitcoin has caused the chaos. Hopefully this point will get through. Bitcoin is the change maker. Bitcoin is the shape shifter. And as far as the future of Bitcoin, what we're waiting for now is for one of the cartel members to break ranks. So we need a central bank to break ranks from the other central banks, or Saudi Arabia, which is essentially a central bank. My guess is that Saudi Arabia starts buying Bitcoin aggressively. You've got Saudi Aramco. It's the biggest company in the world. They've got trillions of dollars. They've got more money than Jamie Dimon has in cash. And they're going to look at Bitcoin and they're going to be like, well, you know, we're just going to throw this thing under the bridge, this global economy. We're going to own the whole thing. This is a way for Saudi Arabia to take over planet Earth's economy, is to start buying Bitcoin if they want to.
Well, the point is that whenever throughout history we've had these sort of epochal shifts, and we've already talked about all these Thucydides trap, the fourth turning, all these generational shifts, you do see it's whoever has the energy. The energy is crucial to where the next phase goes. So Bitcoin is, you know, monetized energy.
Yeah, look for Saudis to start pricing their oil in Bitcoin, and that'll be the new thing, the new thing. Well, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, much more coming your way.
Are you interested in Bitcoin but don't know where to start? Fold is the easiest and most fun way to earn Bitcoin on everything you do. The Daily Wheel is free for everyone. You just open the app and spin for free Bitcoin. Seriously, there's no catch. And get the free Fold card to earn Bitcoin back on every purchase. Download the Fold app and get started today.
Welcome back to Max and Stacy Report. I'm Max Keizer. Time now to turn to Martín Cruz of Craft Ice and Spirits. Martin, welcome.
Thank you, Max. Thank you for having me on the show.
My
What a
pleasure.
pleasure.
You know, you have a product that's really fascinating to me, this craft ice, which is essentially these huge ice cubes people put in their cocktails. It's square or round, or these sticks, you know. And you're like the ice mogul here in San Salvador. And we met up quite extemporaneously one afternoon, and we're getting into your story. Your bio reads on Twitter, quote, 31 years later, I'm back in El Salvador to be part of the coming development, Bitcoin. Civar becoming my second home. Thanks, Bukele. You are one of the legions of diaspora who have returned back to El Salvador. You thank President Bukele. Why?
Thank President Bukele because the security in the country has made a drastic change. For the past 3 years now, the country has made a dramatic change on the safety side, going from little towns into the main city. And now it has come to the point where you can be free, walk free along the streets of San Salvador or any little town that you can go to. You would not see this in the past. I never traveled my country like I have traveled in the past 3 years. For that same reason, I was afraid to go to certain locations, certain spots, um, for the fact that you wouldn't know who's watching you or what they want from you, because there were always gang members involved. There were always spotters. There were always people watching you.
Yeah, you told me a story. It was touching that you showed me a little video of your home where you grew up as a kid. And when you were living there, going back 30 years, there wasn't a fence around the home. And then as this gang war got worse, they had to put up a fence. And you said, when the regime exceptional is over, I'm going to go down there and I'm going to rip down that fence. And I feel that you'd be very proud of that moment, and it's a big moment, won't it be?
Of course. So when I was a child, I used to just step out of my front door, go out of go out and play soccer with my friends in the rubble and in the dust on the rocks. All very humble little town. It's called Campo Villalta. And years later, when I came back to El Salvador, I went back to my hometown, and my grandparents' house was already gone. It had already changed from ownership. But my mom and the rest of my uncles, they decided to keep their home. And back in 2018, I asked my mom, why don't we just sell this property and just move to the U.S., just go to Houston, retire here. So Bukele kicked in. His government started doing the right things with the security, and it came to the point where it started changing my perspective towards the country, because even though it's my country, even as much as I loved it, I was afraid to come and visit, because again, I could not go to certain areas or such things. But after coming back last year for like 7-8 times, like I was back to back, that made me feel different about El Salvador. The security, how safe it felt, that was something that I had never felt before. So my parents had put up a fence where I grew up, out of our front door, in that little corridor where I used to play, and I used to just jump that little brick wall, which is like 24 inches tall. I used to just break and go, jump and go play with the rest of my friends in the soccer field, which is right in front of our house. But now I see it, and it's not something that I like to see, because it just brings me back to my memories since I was a child.
So you were essentially, as so many people were, it's traumatized. And this has been rolled back, and you're actually reconnecting with your past as Salvadoran. And of course, you've been living in Houston and doing business in Houston. You also mentioned to me, growing up in the La Union area, your childhood best friend stayed behind. He didn't make the move that you made, and was murdered by gangs.
Yes, of course.
Many people you knew were murdered by gangs. Tell us about the phrase that was used by the pandilla who killed one of these people you knew.
Ver, oír y callar, si tu vida quieres gozar.
Which means?
If you see, you hear, you shut. If life you wants to enjoy.
Right. And this is something that everyone grew up thinking, that if you see something, zip it, say nothing, or you're dead.
Correct.
And now, amazingly, of course, the gangs have pretty much been shut down. Over 50,000 have been locked up. A lot of outside people who don't live here, who are part of human rights organizations, they're saying, oh my goodness, what about the due process of this going on here, la-di-da. But what I say, I'm curious what you have to say about it, is that the human rights of 7 million Salvadorans should come first, right?
Absolutely, 100%. Where have they been for the past 30 years? They have never pronounced themselves towards all these people being murder all the relatives. I mean, you can lock up 50,000 gang members, but you cannot lock up a few hundred by accident. It just makes no sense. I think the number of lives that have been saved since the regime began is, I'm assuming it's over 5,000 now. If I do the math, I'm pretty sure that it's way over 5,000.
Right. So,
lives.
so the regime exceptional, according to the calculations, 5,000 lives have been saved so far.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yes.
And of course, the president's popularity rating is above 85%. When he announced he wanted to run for president again, the support was over 90%, close to 95%. Are you surprised by that?
No, not surprised by that, because everybody in the country supports him. The people that do not support Bukele, what can I say?
It's tough for them to make a case. It's tough to understand where they're coming from. You know, interestingly enough, you know, you're also kind of living in Houston at the same time, and in the United States, it seems like they're having a problem holding on to human rights for the average person. Things are breaking apart in the United States and in places around. Have you made that observation?
I have, yes. Yes, it's just going wild, and that's the reason why I just wanted to get away from all the noise from the U.S., because everything is just going crazy. And I decided to just come over here because I do see a future here. I do see building a life here because of how safe it feels.
So the business that you're in, the ice cube business, it's a niche business, but it's because the economy is growing so rapidly, it's becoming a pretty big business. I mean, I think if I'm not mistaken, you're selling thousands of ice cubes a day.
So we began back in March, and we have made very substantial growth in the past 3 months. Yes.
Does it surprise you?
No, it doesn't surprise me, because, again, going back to the way we see how well the economy held in El Salvador, that's what caused me to move here, because I saw that big potential. The president, you guys, and all the new restaurants, all the exponential growth that is happening now.
When you go back to Houston, and you hang out with other Salvadoran friends, are they chatting about this, or like, hey, what's going on, Martin? Tell us about this. Are they?
I've been over there once since I've been here. Yeah, I have to go because my son turns 12 years old, and so.
But the buzz is pretty positive. I know even when I go back, I run into Salvadorans, and the buzz is very, very positive. So President Bukele has said we can make El Salvador the place we want to be. Everyone has to pitch in, whether it's by simply not littering, or is it by building a community, a business, hope. You're aside from the business that you're also involved with, what other stuff are you involved with?
Okay, so we have plans to put together a mini burger, which, because it's mini, we call it Bit Burger, but it's Bitcoin inspired.
Really?
Yes.
So you're starting another company?
Another company.
A restaurant business, the burger business,
Correct.
the Bit Burger.
Burger
It sounds like a slider, little
Yes.
sliders.
That's exactly what it is.
Okay, and how about on the community front? Do you ever go back to your hometown and spread the love?
I do, absolutely.
What do you do?
Yeah, so as a matter of fact, this Saturday, tomorrow, we are planning on heading out there and giving toys, food to the kids in my community.
Right, and they're happy to see you arrive like an El Salvadoran Santa Claus.
Yes.
And you come there.
I would believe so, yes.
Is the mood amongst this new generation changing? Is positive? They'll grow up not knowing the gangs. That sounds like it might be a very interesting development.
That's my perspective. That is exactly what I would like to do. I want for them to think that their childhood, they were not abandoned. They did not feel lonely. I want them to think of people like me that came back to their hometown. Okay, well, the governments were not doing anything about it. Okay, but there were good people doing things for them. that's the way that I want them to see things now, and keep them away from all the evil things like gangs and such things.
Well, it's an inspiring story. Happy to have met you, and we like your business, and we think it's going to be continuing to grow like gangbusters. And hopefully, we'll have you back on to give us a progress report.
Thank you, Max. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much, Martin. And that's going to do it for this edition of Max and Stacy Report with me, Max Keizer, and Stacy Herbert. Want to thank our special guest, Martín Cruz. Until next time, bye, y'all.